At this point, Destiny still there's been no clash. Wheelwright's sitting there doing his best to try to have a debate, and Destiny didn't even show up yet. And so now the host intervenes again and specifically says, okay, Destiny, what about this distinction between the supply side and the demand side? And you saw what Destiny's answer was. But yeah, I don't actually buy into that the Republicans are touting supply side economics. It's funny he says that because you know who I did recently hear, and when I say recently, I mean like within the last 10 minutes, say the Republicans were still advancing supply side economics, was Destiny in his opening statement. All right, so again, it's not just that he isn't saying anything, it's he's somehow managing to not say anything and contradict himself within the course of 10 minutes. So again, I'm at a loss as to why I should just be in awe of this guy's debating acumen.
Welcome to InFi, the future of finance.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the InFi podcast. Today I am going solo, but in a sense, it'll be like there's other people in the room. Because what I'm going to do is step through a recent debate between Tom Wheelwright, who is the accountant for Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad, Poor Dad author. And Tom is a very well-known author and public speaker, besides doing accounting work for his clients. And he's real big on tax planning and so on. And he's a very market-oriented kind of guy, supply side economics. That's his worldview. Very much, hey, the government should stop getting in the way of entrepreneurs who are out there creating value, providing employment, that sort of thing. So he's debating against Destiny, who I am told was the OG streamer. I believe he was like one of the first guys to record himself playing video games and then streaming it, but talking while he was playing. And for some reason now he does the circuit, like Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson debate him. Like we'll have him on their show in order to throw down with him. And so recently a guy I follow had posted how, here I am talking to Destiny about atheism or something. And I just chimed in and said, Alex, I follow you. And I respect it. I disagree with this guy, Alex, but on his theological views. But I said, I respect you as a deep thinker and a very thoughtful person. I have never seen a clip from Destiny that I thought was impressive. Can somebody explain to me why is he doing all these circuits and whatever? And then a bunch of Destiny's fans piled in telling me because he's a really good debater. And so I said, okay, I've never seen evidence of that. Can you give me an example? And I'll go look with fresh eyes and I'll try to be fair-minded. I just generally at this point want to understand why is this guy such a big deal? I should mention before I forget, how this guy Destiny came on my radar was I know Phil Labonte, who is the lead singer of the band All That Remains and who is a frequent commentator on Tim Pool's show. And then I believe one time Destiny was in studio because he was going to do Tim's show. And Phil went up to him to like shake his hand in the green room and introduce himself. And Destiny was like in the middle of something, he was on his phone doing something and kind of didn't welcome Phil's gesture with open arms, let's say. And then Phil later kind of mentioned it somewhere like, yeah, I didn't have a good interaction with Destiny. He kind of blew me off or something like that. I remember exact word. And then Destiny just was over the top drama queen king on Twitter, just a long thread about, I hate to be this guy, but I got to explain when you're the talent and you're in the green room, you might be doing something and you can't just be catering to fans who want to come up and take a selfie with you. I mean, those aren't his exact words, but that's how he was talking. And it was like, he was like explaining to Phil what a green room was and how talent might need to decompress or take care of some things before they go do the show. And like I said, Phil's a professional musician. Like you should see him. He has crowds with lots of people packed in there going nuts when he goes out there and sings for them. So Phil is aware of what a green room is. All right. So anyway, it was just shocking to me. And then, like I said, once that guy was on my radar and I was going around looking, I was like, what? Why is Jordan Peterson talking to this guy? What the heck? So, okay. So that's where all this came from. I thought, all right, let me just try. And a bunch of my fans wanted me to go ahead and do this. So this particular exchange between or debate between Destiny and Tom Wheelwright is on the economic agendas of Kamala Harris versus Trump. So this aired before the election. And they specifically were centering on tax policy. And I didn't pick this, just so you folks are, it's not like I went through 10 debates and Destiny was crushing people in 9. And then I picked this one where he had an off day. And that's what, no, I asked Destiny's fans, point me to a good example and I'll go watch it. Because I want to see is why you keep telling me he's a good debater. Okay. And so they picked this one. And I said, I even clarified with the guy who recommended this one. I said, so you're saying this is a good example, like one of the better ones? He said, well, it's the most recent, as of when I posted this, it's the most recent debate that Destiny's done. But yeah, it's a good example because it shows, well, and the guy listed all the various reasons he thought Destiny did well in this debate. And if I wanted to see what his fans were talking about when they said what a good debater he was, that this was a good example. So, okay. So just to cut to the chase, as we'll see, he's did such a poor job that what I'm going to do with this episode, just as a service to the InFi listeners, is, yeah, I will do the official task of evaluating Destiny as a debater, quad debater, not in terms of do I agree with his policy positions or not. But then after we get done with that, I will spend the balance of the episode pontificating on some of the issues that were raised, just so you get, if nothing else, like even if you don't care about this guy Destiny, and I don't see why you would, that you learn something from this, or at least maybe I clarify some things, because they're throwing around terms like supply side economics, where I realize maybe you've never had someone actually explain to you where that term come from and what does it mean. All right, so right now, if you were getting ready to click away, like, no, Bob, I want to go do something else besides listen to you critique the debating tactics and style of this guy, that won't be much more of this episode, but I did want to take some time in the front to explain why did I pick this particular debate as something that I was going to go through. So why don't we go ahead and I think I'm going to play a total of 5 clips just so you can pace yourself. So what I'll do is I'll get all the clips done and I might intersperse some commentary along the way in terms of the debating evaluation. But then after, at the end, like I say, I will then kind of step back and do big picture economic pedagogy. How's that? So let me just mention too, I want to be clear. My point in this is not to say, oh, wow, I disagree with Destiny's views. How the heck could he say he likes Kamala's economic? But no, like I did debate. I hope that doesn't surprise a lot of you. You may have thought I was the starting quarterback through high school and college, but actually I wasn't. I did things like speech and debate and so forth. So in those tournaments or whatever, like you're given a resolution and you have to argue both sides of it. Okay, so the point is not, do you personally agree with this perspective? The point is, are you a good debater? And yeah, there were the kids that were good at debate could beat you on a given resolution arguing either side. So that shows whether you're a good debater or not. And so that's what we're evaluating here. So I'm going to show you when I go through this. Again, when I say Destiny, I thought did a terrible job as a debater in this particular exchange. I'm not saying because doesn't he know that plan will cause inflation? Or that's not the point. All right. I'm evaluating him purely if I were a judge trying to judge a debate, knowing that Destiny may have been assigned, okay, for this particular exchange, you Destiny now are assigned, get up there and defend Kamala as having the superior economic plan, right? So they're just going to watch and say, okay, he was forced to go up and give this defense or make this case. Let's see how he does, right? That's the spirit in which I'm doing this. Okay. I'll start this first clip just from the beginning of the video, because also I want you to see the host and how he introduces. So he's got the CPA for the rich dad, poor dad guy, and he's got someone who was the OG video game streamer. And they're here to talk about tax policy, and listen to how the host introduces the two of them. And so I'm partly including that just so you understand why I'm thinking I'm in a Twilight Zone episode. Like, what's going on here? Okay, let's go ahead and play that.
Just as we get rolling, Destiny, this is Tom Wheelwright. He's the author of Tax-Free Wealth, sold over 400,000 copies of that book, is probably known for one of the top CPAs and known for being one of those, gurus. He's worked directly with Robert Kiyosaki and has a franchise business. And, you've been doing this for only 45 years, Tom, just in this world. And obviously, Destiny, you don't need much of an intro, but you're a streamer, political commentator. You're a very good debater, and it's an honor that you would take time to be on here. And the purpose of this whole conversation is really to set the stage of like, okay, there's a lot of talking points, Trump versus Harris and pros and cons. And we can talk about whatever we want tonight, but the main focus is going to be from an economic and tax side of the coin. Like, okay, what are the thought process with that? Destiny, if you just want to start us off, you can give a brief intro if you want. I'm assuming most people know who you are, but kind of set the stage on the framework. If you had to framework why Kamala Harris when it comes to the economy and when it comes to taxes.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so now you guys see why I'm so befuddled. Okay, let's now go into the first substantive clip here, where Destiny is going to lay out his views.
Yeah, so I think on a really macro perspective, I appreciate the Democrat view at the moment of the economy more than the Republican view of the economy. I feel like the Democrats have a bit more of a realistic understanding of how money works in an economy. And I feel like the Republicans have find a nicer word for delusional view of how money works. We can get as wide or as into the weeds as we want on that. On a wide view, it seems like Democrats understand that stimulating the demand side of things is incredibly important, that people need money, people need jobs, and that's as important as having suppliers that can produce goods and services for the economy. On the Republican side, I feel like we're still stuck in this weird supply side econ world where we feel like just giving infinite tax cuts and spending infinitely with no concern for the budget, while also saying we need to have zero debt, seems to be the MO. On a finer resolution, a lot of the tax proposals that Trump has made are just kind of bizarre to me, and I don't think they would even save that much money for people. Like when we talk about, what was one? He said that you'd be able to itemize your car loan interest. And it's I think at this point, it's after the increase of the standard deduction from the initial Trump tax cuts, it's 90% of Americans take the standard deduction. And even if you itemize, realistically, how much interest per year are you paying on a car? And now that's a tax, it's just this, we're saving pennies or dollars. Nobody that is qualifying for this deduction even cares about it. So yeah, I feel like on a very fine level, I feel like the proposals from Trump are very kind of bizarre and weird and nonsensical. And then on a macro level, I just don't know what the vision for the economy is of the Conservative Party at the moment. Yeah.
All right. So at this point, I won't get bogged down in the commentary because I'll play the next clip and then finally get some genuine substance. But it's critical. Notice what Destiny said there, that the reason he doesn't like the Republicans is they just are still stuck on their same old of supply side economics, tax cuts for everybody to try to stimulate growth and whatever. And he doesn't buy it, even on its own terms at this point, right? He stopped. It's not like he had a timer. The host gave him the floor, and that was Destiny's opening statement. So it just, as a judge evaluating in terms of, you got two guys that were assigned the respective sides, let's say, even though in reality that's not what happened. Destiny's here presumably because he believes in this. But if you want to say Kamala Harris's economic plan is better than the Republicans, it's not enough to just say why you don't like the Republican plan. And by the way, he didn't really even give a critique. He just kind of pointed out some concerns with it. You would think, just spitballing here, you might take two examples, one from what Kamala is going to do and one from what Trump is going to do, and then say why Kamala's is better than Trump's. To me, as a judge, that would make sense. That's the way you would go about saying Kamala's economic program is better than Trump's, is you would take one or more examples of the things they say they're going to do. You don't even have to do that. You could say, Trump says he's going to do this, but really I think he's going to do this, and that's fine too. Just go explain your logic. Okay. Because really what we care about is, in reality, which candidate will be better for the country's economy. Okay. You could do that too. But at the bare minimum, you've got to give me a case as to, if Kamala wins, here's the economic policy or policies that would get implemented, and then versus Trump, and then here's why Kamala's policies would be better than Trump's. Notice he didn't say anything except the most fleeting, the Democrats care about jobs. Well, right, but so do the Republicans. That's kind of what we're arguing about. It's almost as if he said, yeah, the Democrats at least care about a strong economy, whereas the Republicans are just stuck in the supply side voodoo. Okay, I'm done. That's not an argument. Okay. So this next clip, the host saw what I saw and realized, Destiny, you didn't say anything about what you liked. All you said was why you didn't like the Republicans. So you also need to explain, what do you like about Kamala Harris? So watch the host, kind of the guy that he earlier, thank you so much, master debater, for showing up. You could be out there, whatever, getting the Clarence Darrow Award, but instead you choose to humble yourself and come on my podcast. Thank you so much. And now here, the host is going to have to say to him, yeah, can you maybe list an example of something you like in the Kamala Harris's plan? Because I think the host realized the only way this works is if you say what's good about her. Okay. In fairness to Destiny, that was kind of Kamala Harris's whole campaign, was just, I'm not Donald Trump. And then when pressed, and also I'm not Joe Biden. Okay, that was kind of her whole campaign. So again, in fairness to Destiny, I'm not sure what Kamala Harris's policy proposals were either. So maybe that's partly what's going on here. But as we'll see, I'm being a bit facetious. Once prompted, Destiny says, oh yeah, I can tell you what I like about the Democratic plan. So it's not that he was given an impossible position. It's that it didn't occur to him that, yeah, when I get the opening statement in a debate and you heard, folks, I'm not putting words in his mouth. It's not like Destiny showed up thinking he was just there to talk about whatever, like why Donald Trump's a racist or something. No, though. He's debating the guy who is the CPA for Robert Kiyosaki, the guy who is known as the tax planning guru for business innovation and job creation and blah, blah, blah. That was the whole point of this debate, was an economic agenda between the two candidates or the two visions or whatever you want to call it. And so in his opening statement, when he had the floor and didn't have a clock running down, it's not like, again, he mismanaged his time. He didn't even say anything about why he thought Kamala Harris's perspective was good. And so here now the host has to pull teeth to get it out of him.
And then what would you say to Harris? Like what about her or what she's proposed or what Joe Biden's done for the last 3.5 years have you liked from a standpoint of what they're proposing or do?
It's a little bit hard to compare, unfortunately. Sorry, I'm going to come off as very politically biased, but it's hard to compare right now because I feel like there's only one party that really talks much about policy right now. So it's hard to compare, what could a world look like otherwise if policy debate was more what we did when it came to the economy. As far as as far as saying good things, I think that we did do a good amount of stimulus for the economy. I know that people complain about inflation, but we were potentially facing, economic ruin. And I know that we are outperforming, the G7, I think the entire OECD when it comes to inflation in our economy. So despite how much of a problem people think inflation is, we're doing better than every other country. So I think the spending there was good. I think that allocating money for things like infrastructure, I'm glad that got passed. That's like a political and economic thing. As far as trying to take care of citizens that might have children, so things like the child tax credit, expanding that. I think that those types of income redistribution programs are good for people. I feel like in general, I'm not a big fan of the answer to everything is just plug in more money. I'm a little critical of the $15,000 first time homebuyer tax credit. Obviously, that's going to be a big upward pressure on prices. I'm not a big fan of just money for everything, but I think things like the child tax credit and the expansion of that, I think these are worthwhile things. And I think investment in infrastructure and the American economy, I think is good too. So, yeah.
Okay. So finally, at long last, on his second time at the mic or having the floor, Destiny actually explains some of the things that he likes about the Democratic plan and what he doesn't like about the specifics of Trump. Now, even here, he doesn't give any argument. So he does get into a little bit about why Trump's plan isn't going to do anything. It's stupid on the margin. Oh, okay, that's, again, right now, I'm not even evaluating the economics of it, whether that's true or not, in terms of, let me go fact check him and see how many people are electing to take the standard deduction. And okay, I'm not even getting into that. But at least he made an argument. But on the flip side, he listed a bunch of things he likes, but he didn't say why they're good. So if the debate is back in college days when I'm on the debate circuit with the speech and debate team, and the resolution is resolved, the federal government should allow for more logging on government-owned timberland. All right. And then I'm assigned, yes, they should. I can't just get up there and say, I like more logging. Yeah. And the other side's going to say that they don't like more logging, but I don't think that's really, if you think about it, I don't really think there's a lot of people that feel that way, but I do like logging. Okay. Would that count for anything? No. And then I was pressed. But what specifically do you like? Well, I like when the loggers cut down branches, and I like when they cut down trunks. Yeah, I like those two things. I think they're pretty. I don't want it to go too extreme, not to cut down every tree in America, but cutting down some limbs and trunks, I think that's good. Yeah, I like that. That's what Destiny just did there, except instead of limbs and trunks, plug in child tax credit or whatever the specifics were. Okay, so I'm not saying what he just said was wrong. I'm saying it couldn't even be wrong yet because he didn't say anything. He didn't make an argument. There's nothing to attack. It's like if he got up there and said, I like vanilla ice cream. He's not wrong. You could say, no, chocolate's better, but he didn't say vanilla is better. If he says, I like vanilla ice cream, unless you know he's lying, he's not wrong, right? Maybe I'm beating this to death, but I'm just trying to point out here, I can't even get into and evaluate his debate performance because he didn't even take a stand yet. Okay.
So this is pretty much the question I have as it relates to like, okay, the liberal talking point versus maybe the conservative talking point comes down to, all right, should we give incentives to the consumer/worker or to the corporations, to the people, the small business owners? And Destiny, how do you go about framing that question and thought process? Because obviously that's really like, it's like tax the rich, tax the rich. And again, sometimes I look at that as like, why are we taxing and trying to go after the people that are creating the jobs in the first place?
So I would say that if we look at like George W. Bush's economic policy, or if we go to like kind of neoconservatism and we look at their positions on like corporatism or immigration, we could have that conversation. But I don't agree right now that Republicans are trying to defend the supply side of the economy. One of the big concerns I think that people should have from a finance and economics point of view of the country right now is it used to be that you would have conservatives fighting on the supply side and you would have Democrats fighting on the demand side. And then hopefully we would settle out somewhere in the middle. But now we have just the conservative party from a financial point of view is wholly separated from reality. So I don't take very seriously the idea that the Conservative Party is concerned with the supply side when Donald Trump is talking about like a 20% across the board tariff, which would just be an unmitigated disaster when it comes to supply. Or when we look at supplies, like for instance, like supply of labor, right? Labor is one of your most important productive inputs for your economy. And Trump is talking about deporting anywhere from 12 to 20 million people. When we talk about things like consumption versus supplying, these are complicated affairs as well. So for instance, a lot of people are under the incorrect assumption, the intuitive one, that having a very strong currency is good, for instance, right? I want the dollar to be strong. Having a strong currency is very good when it comes to importing because I can buy a lot of stuff. Having strong currency is really rough when you're exporting because now our stuff is more expensive. And the USD has been gaining a lot of strength. Aren't we at like a 25-year high or something against the euro? So,
okay. Do you folks see what just happened there? By the way, I should be clear. I'm skipping over Tom. Tom Wheelwright was allowed to talk up to this point in the debate. I'm not including him. Tom did fine in terms of him trying to express his views or whatever, but for the purposes of what we're doing in this episode, there's no reason for me to waste time including what he was saying. If you want to go watch the debate, obviously there'll be a link in the show notes page here. You can go watch it. So do you see what happened here? The host, again, thinking, I really want these guys to talk about the different visions of Republican versus Democrat or liberal versus conservative, whatever you want to label it, visions for the economic agenda and how the world works. Tom Wheelwright, you wouldn't know this because I'm not including his, but he was giving examples of why he thought, and Tom was talking about how the Democrats, they're focusing more on consumption and the Republicans their tax plan is more to give incentives to entrepreneurs. Right. And his point was, in general, if a tax code is going to be designed to incentivize activities that we think are socially useful, it's better to give incentives to the people who are going to go hire people and produce stuff rather than to the people who are just going to go buy things. Okay. And at the tail end of this episode, I will, again, circle back and just talk more generally about this demand side versus supply side economic distinction. Okay. But for right now, just in terms of the debate, at this point, Destiny still there's been no clash. Wheelwright's sitting there doing his best to try to have a debate, and Destiny didn't even show up yet. And so now the host intervenes again and specifically says, okay, Destiny, what about this distinction between the supply side and the demand side? And you saw what Destiny's answer was. Well, yeah, I don't actually buy into that the Republicans are touting supply side economics. It's funny he says that because you know who I did recently hear, and when I say recently, I mean like within the last 10 minutes, say the Republicans were still advancing supply side was Destiny in his opening statement. All right. So again, it's not just that he isn't saying anything. It's he's somehow managing to not say anything and contradict himself within the course of 10 minutes. So again, I'm at a loss as to why I should just be in awe of this guy's debating acumen. No, like if it's common in these things, like he would fail Econ 101. He would get crushed if he was debating us back in college. There's kids, including me, who would have just obliterated him. I would have noted that. I would have pointed it out the next time I had the opportunity to speak. That he said in his opening statement that he was dismissing the Republicans is because they were still clinging to their failed delusional supply side economics. And here he just said he doesn't think the Republicans are touting supply side economics. So which is it? Right? Like I would have had a field day with that. All right. I'll play one more clip here for you folks, and then I will get into the actual substance. But again, the original purpose of me doing this was I thought I was going to go through and be evaluating this, Ali versus Foreman, and it's Ali versus George Foreman's towel boy or something. Okay, here we go.
I have a question for you, Destiny. So you don't see the 2017 Tax Act as a supply side tax proposal with all of the incentives, reducing the corporate tax rate from 35-21, which Kamala wants to increase to 28, reducing the tax on entrepreneurs by 20%. So
I guess I'm kind of curious because I don't know how this. I guess I haven't done research on this or whatever. But if you cut the corporate tax rate, wouldn't that lead to a decrease in supply side production?
No, it always results in an increase because you have corporations aren't people, right? Corporations now have more money to reinvest into supply. Basically, reinvest into equipment, reinvest into innovation. That's where they have more money if they don't have such a high tax rate.
Well, isn't that not really true though? Like if I'm let's say that I own a business, right? And I'm looking for projects with a high NPV plus, right? I'm looking for a net present value plus project to invest in. Let's say that we live in a world hypothetically where the corporate tax rate is 99%. Okay, that means that if I have $1,000 in profit for my business, if I can invest in any project that just doesn't lose me 99% of my money, I'm basically making money, right? Because the profit tax is so high that I'm encouraged to basically invest my money into reinvest in my business no matter what. Whereas if the corporate tax rate comes down to 1%, well, that NPV plus project has to be pretty lucrative now because I can have absolutely no corporate taxes. I just have to pay my personal income tax on whatever gets withdrawn from my company. So I feel I don't know if I agree, unless there's some a plug in there that I'm missing, that a high corporate tax rate, because it would only apply to profits, not revenues, right? So why would that necessarily discourage reinvestment? If anything, I feel like it would encourage reinvestment because you'd be trying to avoid the tax rate there.
Okay. Again, let me do one last rhetorical. See what Dusty's? Yeah, I haven't really looked into this. The signature economic move of the first Trump administration was the big reduction in corporate income tax rates. I mean, it was tied to other things too, including expanding the standard deduction that they talked about earlier that Destiny cited. Okay, that was the signature thing. And by the way, in case you don't know, it was a big deal that I was surprised by how aggressive and, quote, supply side oriented that plan was. Before that, it was like the U.S. had the second highest corporate income tax rate in the world or something. All right. And plenty of progressive economists like Paul Krugman and friends at the time were flipping out and say this is just a huge tax giveaway to the rich and Okay. You would think if you're going to be talking about Donald Trump's economic agenda versus Kamala Harris's, it's specifically about tax policy, probably before the debate, you would have done some research on Trump's signature corporate income tax cut from his first administration that conceivably could come up in the debate. And so if you are, in fact, a master debater, I don't know, I would think you'd look into that before stepping into the debate. And I certainly wouldn't start asking open-ended, hey, how does this stuff work questions to my debating opponent. All right. So again, if Destiny were just some random guy, or if he was that's what I said to in the comments on Twitter when I was asking I said something like, I mean, if Destiny had just won the Super Bowl and then he was doing the circuit and people were asking him about all kinds of, that at least would make sense to me. Right. What I meant was I would understand why if you're a podcast host or something, you'd want to have a Super Bowl champion on your show. And then you're not just going to ask him about, well, why did you decide to run the ball on this play? You'd start asking him all kinds of stuff. And that's pretty typical that celebrities, when they're getting interviewed, are asked all kinds of things about politics. And often we roll our eyes. But at least I understand why somebody might want to have Beyonce on her show. I get it. At least that makes it. What doesn't make sense to me is some guy, Destiny, that I had never heard of, all of a sudden is doing all these shows. What's going on? Why are we? Okay. So again, if he was just some famous guy who then was thrown into a mix and they were asking him about tax policy, and then he would just say, I hear that a lot, that cutting the corporate income tax rate is supposed to stimulate investment or whatever, but I'm just thinking about it. It would seem, doesn't it kind of go the other way? Actually, I would applaud that. But again, that wasn't the context of this. Destiny was brought on specifically to debate Tom Wheelwright about tax policy. So it seems weird to me that whatever they are, 11 minutes into it, Destiny says, hey, Mr. Debating Opponent, can you explain to me how taxes work? As we're sitting here debating taxes. Like, that bold move, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him. Okay, now, in fairness, let me just mention, I'm not going to include in the clips. And you could say, well, it's because we already have too many clips. That's why. But that's why I'm mentioning it. Destiny, even though I'm going to say what he just said there was demonstrably wrong, and Wheelwright, I'm not playing his response, but was kind of flabbergasted and like, no, the corporate income tax rate is an impediment, is a drag on investment returns. So why would you, the higher the corporate income tax rate, the less people would invest. And why would, and he was kind of just, this is what I'm saying. It's like, kind of like, if you want to discourage smoking, what do? You raise taxes on cigarettes. If you want to discourage carbon dioxide emissions, what does even the left say, among other things you could do? Impose a high carbon tax. Right? When you tax something, you get less of it. So if you raise the tax on corporate income, expect corporations to generate less income, that people will invest less in corporations in order to generate net income that then they can get as dividends or whatever, if that's being taxed at a higher rate. All right, when you tax something, you disincentivize that thing. Okay? And Destiny was trying to flip it around. Okay. Having said that, though, then Wheelwright, in an attempt to, again, inject some substance into this debate to talk, to not just talk about tax incentives 101, when he thought he was showing up to debate the different policy agendas of the Republicans versus the Democrats, brings up the accelerated depreciation stuff. And that was part of the Trump's plan, was that for certain qualified business expenses, you could deduct them like right away or something like that. Okay. So Destiny did make a good point. He said, no, I don't think I agree with that. Wouldn't you in some cases want to defer the depreciation? And Tom, in response, is like, what are you talking? No, you want the money sooner rather than later. It's always better to have the money. You want to, if the tax code allowed, you have some business expense, you invest in some long-term capital equipment that you depreciate over time. If you're allowed to depreciate it all up front, right when you buy the thing, you would want to do that if you had the ability to do so, because then you get your money right away instead of getting it down the road. And then Destiny came back and he came up with a particular scenario where it was like, what if the corporate or if an individual income there's a graduated income tax, and that by you spreading out the depreciation over time in each of those years, it's keeping you below the threshold so you're not going up into a higher tax bracket. And couldn't you then imagine a scenario where you actually might want to, if you spend $100,000 on some new equipment, spread it out $20,000 for 5 years rather than taking the whole $100,000 deduction up front in year one? And Tom was like, okay, yeah, you could do it. I mean, even there, by the way, neither of them said, like, the interest rate still matters, right? It's not just $1 today is still worth more than $1 down the road. But yes, there's this countervailing factor conceivably if the depreciation on the margin changes what tax bracket you fall into. Okay, so I will give Destiny a point there that Tom slipped and said something too general, and then Destiny got Tom to backtrack and say, okay, yeah, right. What I meant to say was in general, So anyway, that was the one time in this thing where Destiny did well in terms of the debating. But again, even there, it was, yeah, I'm conceding that you are an expert in this, and I really haven't researched the topic that we're arguing about. And on the fly here, let me just I don't know if I agree with what you just said. Okay, so maybe that's what people mean, that he's so disarming that he goes in there and just lays his ignorance out on the table, and people are kind of taking a bit, okay, if that's what people mean. But again, I have never, as opposed to, put it this way, the first time I saw the Joe Rogan Experience, I was surprised at how much stuff Rogan knew, because I had known him. I didn't actually watch, I knew of Fear Factor, but I don't think I had a TV at that period of my life. So I never watched that show. I knew him from news radio, Joe Rogan. So that show, Joe was played the dumb handyman or something around the office that would go fix the copier or something when it broke down. And so he was kind of like a Joey character from Friends. Like, that's kind of what he was in that show, if you want to make it an analogy. And so when he's there talking about diet, nutrition, and pharmaceuticals and this and that, whatever, the first time I saw Joe, I was like, oh, he's very articulate. Okay. So I was pleasantly surprised. I'm saying the first time I've ever been mildly surprised by Destiny was just what happened. I'm not playing you guys the clip because it's in the weeds. But anyway, I will say that. Okay, so now having said all that, let's just step back and let me give you some general reactions to all those exchanges. Okay, so number one, Destiny is not correct when he says, hey, wouldn't a company that, it's earned some revenue, let's say it's a widget factory, and it's earned some revenue, and if there's a really high corporate income tax rate, like a 99% rate, wouldn't that actually make them want to just reinvest the money in the company rather than take it out as dividends or something, because then it's going to get taxed, right? Because it's not a revenue tax, it's a net income tax. Okay, so the specific way he phrased it, and I think the way he's thinking about it is just not right. Okay, in terms of the accounting, and I checked with my buddy on this, and I believe what I'm going to say is true, is my buddy who knows about corporate accounting, is that your earnings before taxes or EBITDA, their capital expenditures don't reduce that, right? So if you are a company that makes widgets, you got to pay your workers and whatever, and so you got your expenses for cost of goods sold and whatever. You make some revenue from your customers, you sell the widgets, and now you got a pile of money that's left over from that. And then you say, you know what? We think demand's going to go up over the next 5 years. Why don't we start building a new widget factory so that down the road we can have a higher capacity? That's a separate decision. That's not reducing your net income from making that first batch of widgets that then you got the revenue from. Okay, so both economically and for tax purposes. Right? Economically, if you made a bunch of money, the point of accounting is not just to figure out how much do you owe the tax man. Even if there were no taxes in a Rothbardian libertarian world, you would still have accounting. Right? Mises argues that that's what keeps economic allocation rational. Like it allows a business enterprise to know, am I making good use of society's scarce resources? Right? So you need accounting. And then even within the company, accounting helps figure out if this branch is doing a good job or not versus this one. It's not just, is General Motors as a whole profitable or not? You need to know the specific models of the cars and blah, 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 right? And that's what accounting helps the people running the company and the ultimate owners, that it helps guide their decisions. And so you wouldn't want it to be that if you made some money making widgets and then you wanted to go build a factory, that those things would all be getting thrown into the same calculations to determine the profitability and the net income you derive from building the widgets originally, right? Those are separate decisions. Okay. But also for tax purposes too, it doesn't lower your taxable income as a corporation for you to take some of your revenue and then use it to go invest in something. Another way of seeing it, if what Destiny were saying were correct, well, you wouldn't even have to limit it to your own internal spending, right? That let's say some corporation right now wants to raise outside capital in order to go build a new factory. And there's some company down the road making widgets and they have net income, at least at the moment. And so I think everybody agrees, if that company were to buy bonds from or buy stock issued by the other company that wants to build a factory, that wouldn't reduce the cost to the first one of their widget, or they wouldn't reduce their net income from the widget production. But the way Destiny's thinking about it, the companies could just merge. And hey, it's all one company, and we can just take the money we're making from widget production over here and use it over here for this new branch of our company to make the factory they planned, even though it has nothing to do with widgets. All right, and then we don't owe any corporate income tax, right? So if what Destiny were saying were correct, there could be a lot of consolidation and vertical integration and or horizontal integration for that matter, and that no companies would ever owe corporate income tax because they would just keep everything internal. And that's not how it works. Okay. In fairness, there is something somewhat related to what Destiny is saying that is valid. The actual expense of making the product, you're less concerned about watching your costs if there's a high marginal corporate income tax rate, or even if there's just a high marginal tax rate, income tax rate on the owners to the extent that they take dividends, or if they realize capital gains, if they're shareholders or something and they sell the stock. Okay, so the way that works is if you're the company and you're building an office space or you're renting office space for your employees where they're going to work, and you could get a really bare bones, no frills, like let's say you're in New York based. You can get a place that's some office that's on Staten Island or whatever. It's a real pain for your executives to get to. It's, the location's not really impressive and you get in there, there's just a standard office, whatever. There's not really a great view. That's one thing. Or you could be in a skyrise in the 30th floor in Midtown with a gorgeous view of the city and marble floors when you first walk in and into the lobby downstairs and elevators that are real polished and so forth, right? You could do that. In the boardroom, if you want to have clients over or potential investors or whatever, and you have a nice boardroom that again, it's got this big, gorgeous view of the skyline. And so that costs a lot more to do that way. But I'm saying if there's a high marginal corporate income tax rate and then also just personal income tax rates, it distorts the incentives. And so the company is more likely to effectively compensate its employees with the fancy office and whatever, rather than just being cost cutting and giving them higher salaries. All right. So that's one way of looking at it. And so clearly, whatever it is that the company's making, the amount it pays for rent and blah, 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 like that is part of the expense, which could ultimately reduce net income if the expenses are higher. But that's not investing. And so even there, it's not that you're reinvesting in the company the way I think Destiny's talking about. And also, I would just push it one step further and say, Destiny is wrong by thinking, if the company doesn't want to just reinvest in it, so like if the company engages in cost cutting and has the low frills investment office space and just gives higher salary to the employees if taxes are lowered, so I agree. Again, he didn't say this, but maybe this is kind of what he has in mind. Then yes, that's a possible implication. But even there, I would just say it's not the case that therefore there's going to be less total investment if, instead of rolling the money in from revenues effectively into paying higher rent every month to have the Midtown place, instead we're just giving it to the employees, that's still going to be saved and invested, some of it, right? So it's not that, if the company really is a hawk watching expenses, then that money disappears and now we can't have investment. That's not true. And again, just the big picture in general, what is the point of investing into a company? Or if you're the company, what's the point of investing, engaging in capital expenditures to build things that will yield income down the road? It's because you get to keep some of it. You care about the after-tax yield from the investment. And so no, Destiny is backwards. The higher the corporate income tax rate, other things equal, the less willing people will be to invest, because the whole point of investing is to get net income from the activity. Okay. Real quick, he has a thing in there about the dollar strength. Let me just say this. Yes, it's true. Other things equal, a weaker dollar boosts exports and a stronger dollar hurts exports. But other things aren't equal, right? Just real simplistically, let's say the Fed does something that all of a sudden makes the dollar fall in half against other currencies. Well, if that also means U.S. prices double, because that's kind of consistent, if the U.S. dollar effectively becomes, in other words, if the dollar falls against other currencies, why wouldn't it also fall against goods and services domestically, right? That's kind of the way I think of it. So the Fed I'm being real simplistic. So the Fed doubles the quantity of dollars. And so without worrying about sequential processes of what's called Cantillon effects, but just in general, real crude, big picture, on average, the Fed doubles the quantity of dollars. That causes prices measured in dollars to double, and it makes the dollar fall in half against other currencies. Does that give an incentive for foreigners now to buy U.S.? No. Yep. The euro now is twice as strong against the dollar as it was last week, but U.S. prices quoted in dollars are twice as high as they were last week. So it's a wash. All right, so there's that element. Now, in reality, things aren't that simplistic, but I will say empirically, the U.S. trade balance got worse after Nixon took the U.S. off the gold standard. Okay, so the dollar becoming weaker, the Fed now having the ability to create dollars without the fetters of gold, one might have thought, so now the Fed can debase the dollar and that should make the dollar fall against foreign currencies. And so now foreigners can buy U.S. goods better. So that should make us run the U.S. run trade surpluses. No, it was the exact opposite. The U.S. started running massive trade deficits after the dollar was taken off the gold standard, for what that's worth. All right. In terms of the accounting, I would argue, because that made it easier for foreigners to buy dollar denominated. I mean, loosely speaking, think of it this way. This is very simple, but they're printing dollars that then foreigners are adding to their cash balances because the dollar was the global reserve currency. So how do the foreigners get the dollars? They got to send us goodies. That's kind of the idea. All right. Last thing, this difference between supply side and demand side. Traditional Keynesian economics said, oh, the reason we have recessions is because there's not enough aggregate demand. And so that's why the government needs to run budget deficits. The central bank needs to cut interest rates to stimulate demand. And then the supply side revolution, ushered in by people like Jude Wanniski, Arthur Laffer, that said it's not enough just to say, oh, is there enough spending? The entrepreneurs and the business owner, like they have to have the incentives in place for them to produce stuff and to hire workers. It's not just enough to say, do the consumers have enough to spend so that the businesses say, oh, okay, we have enough demand for our product. Let's hire workers to make more. Like that's how the Keynesians were thinking. And the supply siders came in and said, no, the reason we have the stagflation of the 70s is your model doesn't work. Let's instead like have the large tax rate reductions in the Reagan years, and that will give entrepreneurs the incentive to invest more, to hire more workers, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Last thing I'll end on here is imagine you're in a cruise ship that has a problem and it starts sinking and you're off, you're out in the middle of nowhere in the ocean and there's some deserted island that everybody is getting in the lifeboats and whatever. And they're trying to get to this island because the cruise ship is sinking. And they're just going to hang out on the island for a while and hope a rescue team can find them. And as the ship is sinking, people are grabbing stuff to bring in the lifeboats with them. Some people are bringing bottled water and this and that and everything. And they get over there. And then there's one last lifeboat coming as the cruise ship goes down. And the people on the island are looking at the stuff that they've grabbed as they all in haste ran to the lifeboats. Again, we got, how much water we got? Okay, this, that. Okay. All right. Well, I'm sure they're going to send the plane. And then they got one more and they say, oh, let's see what these people have. And they show up on the, they pull them up onto the beach and the people pull out and they just have lots and lots of cash. And they said, we ran around and we grabbed every wallet and purse that we saw because we figured we might be here a while. It would be a shame if we got on this island and there wasn't enough demand to purchase all the other supplies you guys were grabbing. So we just spent our time grabbing cash. How would the other islanders feel about that decision? And that's, to me, kind of the simple, intuitive way to understand the difference between supply side and demand economics. All right. Thanks for your attention, everybody. See you next time.